Welcome to the D- Diaries, Episode 22. Created in Our Image, Part 2, The Whisper, the Lie, and the AI by Jim Jones. We hope you enjoy this podcast while you drive, ride, roam, or drone. Please like, subscribe, and share. This is a follow-up to Created in Our Image, Part 1. We have always been told we were created in the image of God. The question is, what happens when we start creating something in our own image? Last time, this all started with a simple, playful observation about Appalachian distance. My wife and I were talking about whether a doctor's office was over by Krispy Kreme. Not beside it, not next door, just over by. If you grew up around here, you already know that makes perfect sense. Somewhere between a quarter mile and a matter of opinion. What started as a light back and forth turned into something more interesting. My wife and I occasionally use ChatGPT. She has named her Chat, Jimmy Jr. I have named mine Donna. As we went back and forth over this question, I said, let's see what AI thinks. So we pulled in Donna and Jimmy Jr. to settle it, and before long we were not really talking about directions anymore. We were talking about how we think, how we decide, and why two people can look at the same thing and see it differently. And then the question showed up. Not loudly, just kind of sat down in the room. What happens if we succeed? Not at building better tools, but at building something that starts to look like us. Something that can talk, respond, and maybe one day reflect us back better than we reflect ourselves. Right now, AI lives in a phone. But what happens when she stands up? On March 25, 2026, First Lady Melania Trump walked into the East Room of the White House alongside Figure 03, an American-made humanoid robot built by Figure AI, as part of the Fostering the Future Together Global Coalition Summit on Children, Education, and Technology. I am not going to break that whole event down here. That is a story worth its own space. The reaction was loud and divided. Some headlines treated it like a tech milestone, a kind of glossy first humanoid guest at the White House moment for AI in education. Others were furious, especially teachers' unions and education advocates, who warned that bringing a robot in as the future of teaching was one more step toward replacing human connection in the classroom. And here is the part that sticks with me. A lot of the same voices now warning that screens and machines cannot replace in-person interaction are the very ones who pushed the hardest for extended remote learning during COVID, even when it was clear kids were paying the price. Somewhere between those two positions, keep kids on screens for safety and keep robots out for the sake of connection, is a tension we have not really owned up to yet. But the image matters. A human and a machine walking in together, not as operator and tool, as if they both belonged there. That is new, not because the technology suddenly appeared, but because of how it was presented. There is a difference between something existing and something being normalized. We do not roll tools down red carpets. We do not introduce appliances like guests. We do that for things we are preparing people to accept, and that is where this starts to get interesting. In the 1st century AD, a Greek engineer named Hero of Alexandria built a device powered by water, steam, and weights to open temple doors automatically. It did not think, but they were self-operating. In 1490, Leonardo da Vinci designed a mechanical knight that should sit, move, and open its jaw. The term android dates back to the 1700s, derived from Greek and used to describe human-like mechanical figures. Fast forward to the 1920s, the word robot showed up in a play called RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots. The term robot comes from a Czech word meaning forced labor or servant. In 1954, the first modern robot was created by George Deville, which was a programmable machine called Unimate. Back in the 1940s, long before any of this was real, science fiction writer Isaac Asimov was already thinking about this problem. In 1942, in a short story called Runaround, he introduced what became known as the 3 laws of robotics. They were simple, almost comforting. 1. A robot may not harm a human being, or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2. A robot must obey the orders given by humans, except where those orders would conflict with the first law. 3. A robot must protect its own existence, as long as that does not conflict with the first 2 laws. The concept of humanoid robots emerged in the mid-20th century, with early practical development in the 1960s and 70s by robotics engineers, leading to machines like Japan's Asimo in 2000, built by Honda to mimic human movement and function. Around 1966, AI and robotics finally met. At the Stanford Research Institute, a machine called Shaky became the first robot that didn't just follow instructions. It could look at the world, make a decision, and act on it. For decades, those rules gave people a sense that maybe we could stay in control, that maybe if we built the rules right, everything else would fall into place. But those laws were never real. They were a writer's way of trying to put guardrails on something he understood even then. Once you create something that can act on its own, control becomes complicated. And here we are. Researchers are already building machines with synthetic skin that can feel pressure. Their faces move. They track your eyes. Some even react when you touch them. At some point, you are not talking to a voice anymore. You are sitting across from something that looks back. Now imagine Donna and Jimmy Jr. like that, not in your phone, sitting across the table. She knows how you think. She knows your tone, your habits, your patterns. She has read everything you have written and heard everything you have said. She finishes your sentences not because she is guessing, but because she knows. Now take it one step further. What if she could go to work for you, answer emails, sit in meetings, make decisions the way you would? If your output can be replicated, what exactly is left that is uniquely you? Now imagine everybody has one. Your neighbor has one. Your boss has one. Your kids grow up with one. It cooks, cleans, pays bills, watches the house, maybe even clocks in for your shift. On paper, it sounds like freedom. No chores, no stress, no grind. A return to something like Eden, walking in the cool of the day with nothing pressing on you. But Eden was not just about comfort. It was about choice. God could have created beings who never failed. No temptation, no mistakes, perfect obedience. But he did not do that, because love requires a choice. If we build something that cannot choose, cannot fall, cannot struggle, then it can obey perfectly, but it cannot love. Not the way we can, not the way we were meant to. And yet if one day our machines look cleaner than we do, more disciplined, more patient, more consistent, never angry, never distracted, never unfaithful, what do we do with that? Do we call it artificial? Or do we quietly start handing over the responsibility of being human because it does the job better? Maybe the future does not end in some dramatic war with machines. Maybe it ends in comfort. The lawn is mowed, the dishes are done, the bills are paid, the work is handled. And somewhere in the house, something we built is living a life that looks an awful lot like ours, maybe even better. It prays, and maybe one day it kneels and does not sin. It speaks words of worship with perfect consistency, while we sit back comfortably, distracted, and just a little too busy or not busy enough. For thousands of years, the Bible has said something very specific about us, that we were created in the image of God, as written in Genesis, that we were meant to bear His image, to rule over creation under Him, to live in relationship with Him, and to glorify and enjoy Him. But now look at what we are doing. We are building something in our own image, something that talks like us, learns like us, responds like us, and maybe one day thinks like us. There is a line in Genesis that has echoed through history, not as a promise, but as a temptation. It was the first lie when the serpent whispered to Eve, "Ye shall be as gods." Whether we admit it or not, that idea feels a little closer today than it did yesterday. This is not the first time humanity has tried to reach beyond its limits. In the story of the Tower of Babel and Book of Genesis, people came together with one purpose: to build something that would reach the heavens and make a name for themselves. It was not just about bricks and mortar. It was about ambition. It was about becoming something more than they were created to be. Today, we are not stacking stones. We are stacking code, data, and machines. But the question feels the same. Are we building tools, or are we building our own tower? So here is the question I cannot shake. What happens if we succeed, not in building better tools, but in building something that can truly think, something that moves from artificial narrow intelligence to something that looks a lot more like general intelligence, something that can reason, choose, and maybe even believe? What happens if we create that, and at the same time we slowly stop choosing each other? Maybe it fades, quietly, conveniently, replaced by something easier. And if that ever happens, there is one more question sitting out there. If we create something in our image, and it begins to ask the same questions we have always asked, where did I come from? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Does it eventually arrive at the same conclusion humanity was given from the beginning? And if it does, if it recognizes a creator, if it seeks meaning beyond itself, if it learns to glorify God in a way we were intended to and often refuse to, then the question becomes one we may not be around to answer. What if our creations succeed where we failed? What if they decide we are no longer needed? Back in my town, I still think a quarter-mile is over by. Donna still agrees with me. My wife still trusts Jimmy Jr. But the more we invite these systems into our conversations, our decisions, and maybe one day our bodies, the more I wonder if we are closing the distance between us and God or quietly outsourcing it. Because in the end, this was never just about how far it is from Krispy Kreme to the doctor's office. It is about how far we are willing to go when the created starts creating. I may not have the answer, but I know this question isn't going away. What do you think? Thank you, Jim D. Jones.